Chapter 5, Histology and Tissue Organizations. We have trillion cells in our body, and they are organized into more complex units, which we call them tissues. Tissues typically are groups of similar cells and extracellular material that perform a common function, such as providing protection or facilitating body movement. The study of tissues is called histology. Histological images are viewed using various types of microscope, which provide different level of details for each tissues. In human body and in animals, we have 4 different types of tissues. As you see here, we have epithelial tissue, we have connective tissue, we have nervous tissue, and we have muscular tissue. The epithelial tissue are composed of layers of closely spaced cells which cover the surface of our organs, form the glands, and serve for protection, secretion, and absorption. The location of our epithelial tissue is our epidermis, inner lining of digestive tract, liver, and other glands. The other tissue is called connective tissue. The connective tissue with usually more matrix than cell volume, and they're often specialized to support, bind, and protect organs. The connective tissue is very diverse in our body. We have tendons and ligaments, we have cartilage, we have bone, blood, and lymph in this group. The other types of tissue is called nervous tissue. This tissue containing excitable cells, which we call them neurons, and they are specialized for rapid transmission of coded information to different types of cells. The nervous tissue can be seen in the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. And the last tissue is called muscular tissue. The muscular tissue composed of elongated, excitable muscle cells, and they are specialized for contraction. We can see muscular tissue in the skeletal muscles, the muscles which attach to our bones, the heart, and the wall of our viscera, the wall of the organs like stomach, uterus, urinary bladder, intestine, or the other internal organs. And in this chapter, I want to talk about 4 major tissues and the differences between them, their characteristic, and their function for our body. The 4 primary tissues differ from each other in types and function of their cells, characteristic of their matrix. Matrix is the space which we have between cells, and the space occupied by cell versus. The matrix is extracellular material. Everything which we have around our cells is called matrix. And in the matrix, we have fibroprotein or fibers, and we have a clear gel, which we call it ground substance. Look at this picture. In this picture, you can see different types of cells. This is one cell, this is the other one. Here you have the other cell with the other shape, and here you can see the others. Between the cells, everything which you have is called matrix or extracellular material. And this extracellular material composed of these different fibers. Some of them are pink here, some of them are, as you see in this picture, are dark purple, and some of them are brown. They are different fibers, and I will talk about them later for you. And between the fibers, we have a pale pink gel material, which we call it ground substance. Integration of tissues. I want to show you in all of the organs which we have in our body, we have different types of tissue. Imagine that this is a cross section of your small intestine. In the small intestine, this blue part is the lumen or the cavity which the food passed through. After that, you can see the epithelium. The epithelium line your small intestine, and this epithelium is specialized for secretion and absorption. After that, you have some layers of muscles which can go to contraction, and by their contraction, the food can pass in the lumen. Between the epithelial tissue and the muscle, you have connective tissue. The connective tissue can do connection. The connective tissue can join these different parts together. And between all of these tissues, we have nervous tissue, which we don't have it in this picture, but the nervous tissue can regulate the function of the muscles and the glands in our small intestine. And the first tissue which I want to talk about is epithelial tissue. We have different functions for our epithelial tissue. One of the functions is physical protection. They can protect deeper tissues from injury and infection. Epithelial tissue protects both external and internal surface from dehydration, abrasion, destruction by physical, chemical, or biological agent. The epithelial tissue can produce and release chemical secretion. Some epithelial cells are specialized to produce and release secretion. These cells can form glands, and the gland may be individual cells scattered among other cell types in the epithelium, or they are arranged in a small organized cluster within the multicellular gland, which I will talk about them later for you. They can excrete waste product. One of the functions of our epithelium is excretion of waste. One of the function is absorption of chemical, including nutrient. The epithelial cells typically exhibit a range of permeability. It may be relatively non-permeable to some substance while promoting and assisting the passage of the other ion and molecules. All substances that enter or leave the body should pass through the epithelium, and the epithelial cells act as gatekeeper for us. And this is the meaning of selectively filter substances. And also, the epithelial cells can sense stimuli. Epithelial tissue are innervated by sensory nerve ending to detect or respond to different types of stimulation. These nerve endings and those in the underlying connective tissue continuously relay sensory input to the central nervous system concerning touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. Additionally, several organs contain a specialized epithelium, which we call them neuroepithelium. And this epithelium houses specific cells which are responsible for the sense of sight, taste, smell, hearing, and balance. These are the functions which we have for our epithelium. We have some characteristics for our epithelial cells. First, in this picture, you can see a group of epithelial cells. The epithelial cells are connected together by intercellular junction, which I talked about them in previous chapter. We don't have matrix between cells, and if we do have any matrix, the amount of matrix are very, very few. The cells of the epithelium have different borders or different surface. The first surface, which is free or upper surface and usually exposed to the environment or to the internal space of our body, is called apical surface or free surface. On the opposite side, you have the other surface, which we call it basal surface. and all the basal surface are located on the basal lamina or basement membrane. And each cell contains two lateral surfaces which are in contact with the neighboring cells, and the basement membrane anchoring a layer between the epithelium and the connective tissue beneath it. In the basement membrane, we have different types of fibers, and these fibers have the characteristic of anchoring. They can hold the epithelium and the connective tissue near each other. The other properties which we have for epithelium are listed here. First, there are sheets of closely adhering cells. Sometimes we have one layer, sometimes we have more than one layer of cells. They can do mitotic division in high rate because the epithelial cells are in contact with the external environment, and most of the times we have trauma, injury, or problems for the epithelial cells. So they need to have this capacity to regenerate themselves by mitotic division. They are avascular. It means that they don't have any blood vessels, and they can get their nutrient and oxygen from the connective tissue which is located beneath them. They can make most of the glands. Some of the glands are unicellular and some of the glands are multicellular. And they cover body surface and they line the body cavities for us. These are the characteristics of our epithelial cells. Now, I want to talk about the classification of epithelial cells and the epithelial tissue. As you have first name and last name, our epithelial tissue has first name and last name. The epithelial tissue are classified as either simple or stratified. Simple epithelium contain only one layer of the cell. And here you can see simple epithelium. We only have one layer of the cell, and the cells are located on the basement membrane. The other type of epithelium is called stratified epithelium. In the stratified epithelium, as you see here, we have more than one layer. It doesn't matter if we have two or if we have 40 layers. We call them stratified when we have more than one layer of the cells, and named by shape of the apical cells which we have on the surface of them. As you see here, some layers can reach the basement membrane like this one, and some layers don't have any connection with the basement membrane. So up to here, we can classify our epithelium to simple, which is only one layer, and stratified, which is more than one layer. But between simple and stratified, you can see pseudostratified epithelium. It appears layered or stratified because the cell's nuclei are distributed in different levels between the apical and basal surface. As you see here, some of the nuclei are located lower, some of the nuclei are located upper. So they resemble the stratified epithelium. But if we continue each cell, we see that all of them can reach the basement membrane. So we call it pseudostratified or false stratified epithelium. This simple or stratified is the first name of our epithelium. But what about their last name? Their last name is the shape of our cells. Maybe our cells are squamous or flat. Maybe our cells are cube-shaped or cuboidal. And maybe our cells are tall, elongated, or columnar. And then we need to use a first name and last name for our epithelium. If you look at here, you can see that we can have simple squamous. Let me draw it for you. We have simple squamous, we can have simple cuboidal, and we have simple columnar epithelium. In all of these epithelial tissue, we only have one layer. But in simple squamous, the shape of our cells are squamous. In simple cuboidal, the shape of the cells are cube shape. And in simple columnar, the shape of our cells are tall and columnar. The other type of epithelium is a stratified epithelium. A stratified epithelium may be a stratified squamous, may be a stratified cuboidal, and maybe a stratified columnar epithelium. In all of these three epithelial tissue, we have many layers. We have more than one layer. In the first one, the surface cells are flat. We don't pay attention to the other layers. In the next one, the surface cells are cube shape, and in the last one, the surface cells are columnar in the shape. In this picture, you can see shape of the cells. Here you can see the squamous or a flat cells. They are flat and wide. They allow rapid diffusion of substances, and they can see serous fluid. Here you can see the cuboidal cells. They are cube shape, and you see that their height and their width are somehow the same. They can do absorption, secretion, and mucus production. And the last one is called columnar. They are taller than wide, and they can do absorption and secretion. They can secrete mucus, and most of the time they are ciliated. They contain hair-like projection on their apical border. And now I want to talk about simple epithelium for you. We have four types of simple epithelia: simple squamous, simple cuboidal, simple columnar, and we have pseudostratified columnar. And now I want to show you the pictures and their locations. I will talk about goblet cells later for you. Here you can see the simple squamous epithelium. I told you that first, the epithelial tissue line the body cavity or the surface of our body. So all the times you need to have a free space or the lumen on top of the epithelial tissue. And the first layer which you can see is epithelium. In this picture, you see that your epithelium is organized only in single row. Your cells in both pictures are flat. They are very thin. And when they become thin, they can help diffusion or transport of substances. They can secrete serous fluid, and their location are the alveoli of the lung or the air sac in the lung, which wants to do exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The lining of our blood vessels, where we need to exchange respiratory gases and nutrients. And also we have them as the coverage of serous membrane. You already know the serous membrane, like pericardium, like pleura, like peritoneum. So they can cover these serous membrane. The next epithelial tissue is called simple cuboidal epithelium. Here in this picture, you can see the lumen in the kidney tubules, and the first layer of the cells which cover this lumen is arranged only in one layer. But you see that the shape of your cells are cube shape. They are a square, or sometimes they are round. They are not flat. We call them simple cuboidal. They can do absorption, secretion, mucus production, and movement. Here you can see only one layer and our cells are cube shape. In this lumen, again, you can see one layer of the cells and their shape are cube. We can see them in liver, thyroid gland, mammary gland, salivary gland, bronchioles, and kidney tubules. The other type of simple epithelium is simple columnar epithelium. In simple columnar epithelium, as you see here, you have only one layer of the cells. Your cells are located on their basement membrane, but the cells are tall and narrow. They have oval nuclei and their nuclei are located near the base of the cell. The nuclei is not in the apical part or in the center. They can make brush border of microvilli. What is the meaning of brush border? Look at here. When our columnar cell contain microvilli or finger-like projections on their top, their border is very similar to the border of your toothbrush. Because of that, we call it brush border. This brush border can increase the surface area, so we can have more absorption through this epithelium. We call it brush border of microvilli. Some of our simple columnar contain cilia. The cilia can beat forward and backward, and it can move particles on the surface. And some of them contain goblet cells. These cells are goblet cells. They are unicellular gland and they can secrete mucus. The mucus is a viscous substance which is secreted. It's a sticky substance, and I will talk about it in the next chapters for you. And the location of this simple columnar epithelium is lining of the GI tract or gastrointestinal tract or digestive system, uterus, kidney, and uterine tube. So you only have one layer of the cells. Your cells are tall and elongated, and sometimes they contain cilia on their apical border, and sometimes they contain microvilli. Between the columnar cells, you may have goblet cells for mucus secretion. And the last type of simple epithelium is pseudostratified. I told you that in the pseudostratified epithelium or false stratified epithelium, we only have one layer, but because the nuclei are located in different levels, the shape of this epithelium is somehow stratified, but it's actually simple. So we call it pseudo-stratified. It looks multi-layer, but all cells can touch the basement membrane. This is the basement membrane. The nuclei are located in several levels. They have cilia, all of them, and they contain goblet cells. They secrete and propel the mucus. Their location is the respiratory tract and some parts of male urethra. So these are the locations of pseudostratified. This is the cartoon, but here you can see the real picture. You have the basement membrane here. You can see the cells in different layers. You can see goblet cells in this picture, and you have cilia. And this is a key for identification of pseudostratified epithelium. When you see the cilia and goblet cells, you have pseudostratified epithelium. The complete name of this epithelium is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Then we have a stratified epithelium. In the stratified epithelium, I only want to introduce two types of epithelium to you. One of them is stratified squamous, and the other one is called transitional epithelium. In the stratified epithelium, we have 2 to 20 layers of the cells, sometimes more than this. Some cells rest directly on the others, and only the deepest layer of the cells can touch the basement membrane. We have 4 types of stratified epithelium, but 2 of them are necessary for you to know. First, I want to talk about the stratified squamous epithelium. The stratified squamous epithelium has 2 types. One type is called keratinized, and one type is called non-keratinized. But what is the keratin? The keratin is a protein which is secreted on the surface of epithelium. And you have this type of epithelium on your skin, on the surface of your body. When you do scrubbing, when you scrub, you see that something exfoliates from the surface of your skin. They are the dead cells and a protein which we call it keratin. And here you can see this keratin and the dead cells. This keratin is located in the outer part, and then you have different layers of the cells. Look at the picture. This line is your basement membrane. You have many layers of the cells on the basement membrane. Your cells start from here and end here, because in this part you can see the nuclei. And after that, you don't have any nucleus for your cells, and it means that they are dead cells. And the surface cells, the outermost layer cells, are flat in their shape. So we call it a stratified squamous. More than one layer, and the surface cells are flat. This is the real picture. Here you can see the basement membrane, the boundary between epithelium and the connective tissue. You see that you have more than one layer, and the last part where you can see the nucleus, your nuclei and your cells are flat. So we call it a stratified squamous. And because you have keratin secretion on the surface, this epithelium is keratinized. They can resist abrasion, inhibit water loss through skin, resist penetration of by pathogenic organism. And the location is only epidermis or the surface of our body. The other type of epithelium is called non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, including those at the tissue's apical surface, lack keratin, and remain alive. Because all of the cells are alive, the nuclei characteristic of squamous cells are visible throughout the tissue. So you can see all the nuclei from the base layer to the top layer here. We call it stratified because from the basement membrane you have many layers, and we call it squamous because the cell surface, the cells which are make the surface layer are flat in their shape, and we don't have any dead cells on the surface. And they can resist abrasion and penetrate of pathogen. Their location are the surface of our tongue, the mucosa or the epithelium which we have in our mouth cavity, our esophagus, and also the vagina in the female reproductive system is this type of epithelium. And the last type of epithelium which you need to know is called transitional epithelium. A transitional epithelium is limited to the urinary tract, urinary bladder, ureter, and part of urethra. It varies in appearance depending upon whether these organs are relaxed or they are distended. This epithelium, as you see here, has different layers. This is the basement membrane, and you have many layers of the cells. And the surface cells, as you see in this picture, has the round or curved apical border, as you can see here. They are dome shape or pillow shape, and this round surface help them to stretch and provide bigger space for reserving and keeping urine for us. They can allow stretching and filling of urinary tract. Their location, as I told you, is the urinary system. So you need to check the surface of the cells, and you see that these surface, as you see here, are around here or curve shape here. This type of epithelium is called transitional. You can see the curved apical border, or here you have curved apical border. The other key for identification of transitional epithelium is presence of some cells which are which contain two nuclei, which we call them binucleated epithelial cells. So these are the binucleated epithelial cells which you can see in transitional epithelium. These are the different types of epithelial tissue. I will talk about the other tissues in the next video.